From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
I'm so excited. I mean, I would have run here anyways to interview Gene Yang, because he's one of my favorite comic artists. But a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out to the National Book Festival today. And thank you to the Library of Congress for continuing to host this awesome festival of book nerdery. I'm Petra Mayer, and in addition to being very out of breath, I'm also the editor at NPR Books, and we're also media partners for this year's festival. I'd also like to thank the festival's co-chairman, David Rubenstein, and all the many sponsors who helped to make it happen this year and every year. Now, I'm sure you all have already done this, but if you could turn your cell phones off, there will be time for questions afterward. Just be aware that if you do get up to ask a question, you will be filmed for the library's archives. So, on to the main event. I'm so excited to be here today introducing Gene Yang. Like I said, one of my favorite, you got some fans out there, one of my favorite comic and graphic novel creators. He's done so much cool stuff that I'm going to have a little trouble just cramming it all into the 3-minute introduction they told us to do, but I'll give it a go. Gene's graphic novel American Born Chinese came out in 2006 and won just about every award there was to win. It's a lovely book that weaves together 3 separate stories into a funny and profound meditation on identity, belonging, and the Chinese immigrant experience. Identity and belonging are themes that come up a lot in Gene's work. His epic 2-part graphic novel, Boxers and Saints, was a finalist for the National Book Award in 2013. It's the story of China's Boxer Rebellion, told from 2 different perspectives. A young boy who believes that China's gods and heroes are fighting with him against Christian and Western imperialist influences, and a girl who converts to Catholicism after being rejected by the people around her, and who sees visions of Joan of Arc. He's a big fan of superheroes, too. After taking on the Boxer Rebellion, he created a backstory for one of the first Asian American superheroes, the Green Turtle, in the 2014 graphic novel, The Shadow Hero. Gene has also spent many years teaching high school, where he discovered the role comics could play in education. As a substitute math teacher, he made comics to explain algebra for his students. And I believe it was on this festival stage a couple years ago that you recalled your teachers saying, "Mr. Yang, you're kind of boring in person, but we love you in comics."
That's right. That's exactly right.
So the Library of Congress has recognized Gene's commitment to education earlier this year when they named him their ambassador for young people's literature. His latest book is Secret Coders, Paths and Portals, which is part of a series that teaches kids basic computer programming. And I'm going to turn the page now. Basic computer programming concepts as part of a fun adventure story. He's also writing, and this is very cool, the new Superman series for DC Comics, featuring the Chinese hero Kenan Kong. Did I say that?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
And last but definitely not least, you may have heard a couple days ago that he's one of this year's MacArthur Genius Grants recipients. So,
thank you. Thank you.
Please welcome artist, writer, and certified super genius, Gene Yang. Congratulations on the Genius Grant. I mean, that's amazing.
Oh, it's mind-blowing. I feel like my mind is still numb. It's been a shock.
I'm trying to resist asking you if you're going to go to Disneyland, but how will it affect your work, do you think?
Well, so I've been thinking about it. I found out 3 weeks ago. It was one morning, I was pulling out of my driveway to go to Panera Bread. I go to Panera Bread to write, because I used to have a studio at my house, but then my oldest daughter got too old to share a room with the other 2 daughters. So I had to give up my studio so she could have a bedroom. And since then, I've been struggling to find a place to work. So I go to Panera Bread, and then I get a call from the MacArthur Foundation. They tell me this news, and then I just stayed in my driveway for like half an hour after that. I eventually did make it to Panera Bread, but I did not work at all.
Did you order something really expensive?
No, I ordered a cup of coffee, because I was half expecting one of my friends to call me up and go, "Just kidding," but that didn't happen. But I've been thinking about it since then, and I think I see myself as having 3 different roles. I'm a member of a family. I'm a son. I'm a father, and I'm a husband. I'm a cartoonist, and I'm also a teacher. And specifically, I'm the national ambassador for these next couple of years. I want to put some of the resources in each of those roles.
So. What makes comics, I mean, the Library of Congress recognized your work with comics and education. What do you think makes comics such a good medium for conveying information to kids?
Well, really, I think different kinds of information are conveyed best in different ways. And the thing about comics is that, at least in American culture, for decades and decades and decades, their educational potential just wasn't recognized. I mean, it dates back to like the 40s and 50s for really incidental reasons. I don't think comics is necessarily the best medium of communication. It's the one I feel most like heart attachment to, but I don't think it's necessarily the best one. I just think it's another tool in the toolbox. And there's specific kinds of information that are best communicated through comics. For instance, all of you have seen those instruction packets that come with Lego sets. Those are basically comics. They're sequential images, right? And can you imagine reading text to tell you how to put together a Lego set? It would be practically impossible. And I would even argue that comics works better than video for that. Because when you're watching a video, the person making the video isn't necessarily going at the same rate as you want to go to build that Lego set. So that's just a really, really simple example.
Can I just say, will you please like design IKEA manuals? That's where my brain went, right? Those are
those but poorly made comics, I would say.
I read somewhere you had a really interesting comment about how teaching via comics allows kids to set the rate at which they take in the information.
Yeah. I mean, there are all sorts of visual storytelling media. There's comics, there's film, there's television, and out of all the ones that are out there, comics is the only one that doesn't actually have time. Time actually doesn't exist in comics, right? In a page of comics, past, present, and future all sit side by side, and because of that, the reader gets to decide how fast or slow the information goes from the page into their brain. And the same is not true for animation or film or television.
So tell me a little bit about what you've been doing. I mean, you were named ambassador earlier this year, and I think your program was Reading Without Walls?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So every ambassador picks a platform, something that they want to focus on. For me, I chose Reading Without Walls, and by that I mean I want everybody really to explore the world through reading. And I want them to explore the world through reading in three specific ways. Number one is I want people to pick books about people who aren't like them, who don't look like them or live like them. Two, I want people to pick books about topics that they might find kind of intimidating. And three, I want people to pick books in formats that they don't normally read for fun. So if normally you read chapter books for fun, I want you to try a graphic novel. If normally all you read is graphic novels, like one of the kids in my home, I want you to try a chapter book or a book in verse. I just think there's so much great stuff out there in book format. You know, I want everybody to give everything a try.
So, well, let's speak specifically about Secret Coders, which I picked up the most recent volume, and I thought, oh God, I haven't coded since I was, in ninth grade learning Logo on an Apple II, and there it was, Paths and Portals with the little turtle on the front.
That's right.
I'm sorry, I still did. I got the binary bird. That one, I figured that part out. But so, why don't you tell us a little bit about the series and what it's designed to do?
Secret Coders is a project that I've been thinking about for a long time. I taught high school computer science for 17 years. I taught in this really visual way, so I do a lot of drawing on the board. And I always thought a lot of the stuff that I was doing on the board would work really well in sequential art format, in graphic novel format. And Secret Coders is basically that. It's me taking what I used to do in my classroom and doing it on the page. I'm teamed up with a guy named Mike Holmes, who's incredibly talented. He worked on the Adventure Time comic books and the Bravest Warriors comic books before he teamed up with me on Secret Coders. And together, we are trying to teach kids the fundamentals of computer science through comics. And again, the reason why we want to do this in comics is because we want to allow students to take that information in at the rate that best suits them. We want them to be able to reread passages if they need to.
Yeah, I had to reread a little bit of it. It's been a long time since I was working in Logo. So where did you get the idea? What made you think, hey, first of all, learning computer science is important, and secondly, I think comics are a great way to do that?
It dates back to my years in the classroom. When I first took my teaching job, I used to tell students on the first day of every semester that I was also a cartoonist, that I was involved in comics, because I thought that would make them think I was cool.
Did it? Did it work?
I was wrong.
Draft those students.
Yeah, this was like the 90s, right? So comics just didn't have the cachet that they do today. Nobody knew who Iron Man was, let alone like Rocket Raccoon.
Heathens.
Yeah, so very quickly I realized, and the worst part about it is after I told them I was involved in comics, when things got hard in my class, they would ask me comic book related questions to try to get me off track. Like they would raise their hand and go, Mr. Yang, who do you think would win in a fight, Superman or the Hulk? So I just realized I had to keep these two things separate. I would teach by day, I would make comics at night. And eventually they came back together for me in this Algebra 2 class. So one of my colleagues in the math department had to go on long-term leave. I was given his Algebra 2 class to sub. I was the long-term sub. But I was also the school's educational technologist at the time, which meant it was my job to help other teachers work computer stuff into their curricula. So what that meant for this Algebra 2 class was every 2 weeks I would have to miss a couple of sessions because I would be in some other classroom helping some other teacher. So to make up for that, I started videotaping myself giving lectures, and that was horrible. My students hated it. They would come up to me and they would say, Mr. Yang, we thought you were boring in person, but on video, you were just unbearable.
Oh, that's mean.
Yeah, well, teenagers,
Okay, right. Still.
And as a desperate second attempt, I started drawing these lessons in comics, and I would photocopy them. I would hand them out I'd give them to my sub, who would hand them out to the students. And these, much to my surprise, were kind of a hit. Like they preferred me in cartoon format to like actual flesh and blood. So that surprised me because I always thought, man, students grow up with screens. They would prefer to take information in from a screen than in from a page. But I was wrong. They preferred the page, at least in comics format.
So what kind of feedback have you been getting? What are people saying to you about it?
About Secret Coders?
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like people are kind of into it. I mean, there's a certain kind of nerd kid that seems to gravitate towards this series. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get everybody in under the tent of coding, right? Not just the nerd kids. But I did just get a photo a few months ago from a mom of a first grader. And this first grader, in this photo, she was standing at the front of her class, teaching her entire class how to read binary. And that was so gratifying to me. She was using the method I use in Secret Coders Volume 1.
Which are like these little birds, and they have 4 eyes.
Yes.
They're kind of creepy. Are they robot birds?
They're robot birds.
Yeah, and I didn't quite understand it, but then there was that thing with the pennies and the graph.
Their eyes display binary numbers. Yes.
And I'm sure you guys will all understand it. It was a revelation to me, to be perfectly honest. So there you go. It's very educational. I also wanted, but there's a little bit, I mean, I mentioned sort of themes of identity and belonging, and actually, what stuck out to me in the most recent book was that exchange between Hopper and her mother about how to do Mandarin homework. That was so poetic. Like her mother has this one approach, and then she has a different one.
I do have a scene in the second book. Hopper, the main character, her mother is the Mandarin teacher of her school, and part of Mandarin homework is they have to just write these characters over and over and over again, right? And that was actually a struggle that I had when I was a kid. I went to Chinese school every Saturday for 12 years of my life. I speak Chinese like a 4-year-old, so it didn't really work for me. But we had to do that. We had to write these characters over and over and over again. It really felt robotic. And it wasn't until I became an adult that I realized when you practice something over and over and over again, you're not acting like a robot. You're actually gaining the skills to express nuance, And that's kind of what I wanted in that exchange.
Yeah, it's true. And if you're drawing something in Logo, there's not a whole lot of nuance in
this. There's not a lot of nuance, yeah.
Endless repetition.
Yeah. It's just two ways of approaching art, right? There's one, both of them I think have a place.
So we've discussed education and coding and classroom subjects, and we've been mature, and now I want to talk about Superman, because Superman is cool. I feel like we have to maybe give people a little bit of a primer, though, on what's going on right now in the DC universe.
Because it's superheroes, and superheroes are always overly complicated.
Seriously, I mean, it took me so long to get into just Marvel continuity. Like, I sort of vaguely understand the X-Men now, but it's a task, let me tell you.
Well, then, I'm not with you there. I don't understand the X-Men at all. I love them, but I don't understand
I can recommend you a podcast after this conversation.
Awesome.
So, Gene is writing the new Superman.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain why we need a new Superman?
Because superhero comics are super complicated. So this is what happened. In the DC universe this past summer, Clark Kent died. And he was replaced by 3 characters. Number 1 was another Clark Kent from a different dimension. Like I said, superhero.
Didn't he already die like once before?
Yeah, he died once before.
Okay.
But that was also in a different dimension. Anyways, he was replaced by a Clark Kent from another dimension. He was replaced by Lois Lane, who becomes Superwoman. And he's also replaced by a brand new character named Kenan Kong, a 17-year-old kid that is growing up in Shanghai, who gets some of Clark Kent's powers. And that's the series that I'm working on. The 3rd issue of New Superman just came out about a week and a half ago. And this was not my idea. Actually, I did not go to DC Comics and go, hey, let's make Superman Chinese. This was something that they brought to me. And I remember when they first brought this to me, I was like, that is a terrible idea. I don't want anything to do with that.
Why? I think, well,
Oh my gosh. Okay, so it's the idea, from what I gather, it was the idea of Jim Lee, who is the co-publisher at DC Comics. He was a fan favorite artist in the 90s. He made a name for himself working on
Sure.
X-Men. I collected Jim Lee comics when I was in high school.
Didn't he found
I
Wildstorm?
loved him. Yes, and he also founded Wildstorm. And then it was also Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns, a superstar, superhero writer. He's the president of DC Comics now. Supposedly, they both wanted an Asian member of the Superman family, you know? But I did not want to do that because I just immediately, when I heard that idea, I was like, there are so many landmines there, you know, both culturally and politically. So first of all, my parents have very, very specific political views about China. My dad grew up in Taiwan. My mom left mainland China just as the communist government was coming to power. So they have very specific views. And Superman is supposed to be about truth, justice, and the American way. So what does that mean to have a character representing those three things in China, in modern China, right? And I was like, man, I'm gonna get so much hate mail if I do that. I do not want to do it. And then I get called into DC Comics Burbank offices. I have this hour-long meeting with Jim Lee. I'm a huge Jim Lee fanboy. Like I said, I grew up on his comics. I don't even remember what he said. I just stared at his face for like an hour.
I know I've met him too, and I was like,
yeah, exactly like that, with the finger to my lips. And then at the end, I was like, okay, let's do it.
It's true. Now that I've read the first 3 issues, and it's true, there's no equivalent so far in the comics of truth, justice, and the American way.
Yeah,
Not really.
like what so one of the things that, you know, I teach at Hamline University. I teach creative writing to mostly adult students. And one of the things I tell my students is, whatever you're scared of as a writer, just run at it as hard as you can. So because that was what scared me about this Chinese Superman project, I just decided to run at it as hard as I could. So in the first story arc, which takes place in the first 6 issues, the bad guys are the freedom fighters of China who are fighting for truth, justice, and democracy. So it's about how the new Superman reacts to these supposed supervillains.
I should also say, not to put too fine a point upon it, Kenan Kong is a jerk.
Yeah, Kenan Kong is a major jerk. He's
not Clark Kent.
No, he is not Clark Kent.
He's not mild-mannered.
Yeah, he starts off as a bully. And the inspiration behind that is actually from 2 different sources. One is American. Most of you probably have not read Superman stories from the 1930s and 40s. But Clark Kent started off as a jerkwad. He was a major, major jerk. In the 30s and 40s, he would beat people up. And then after he was done beating them up, he would sermonize at them. He would do really brutal things, like he'd take these slumlords and he'd leave them on a desert island to starve to death, and he would never come back for them. He would just let that happen.
I think there's actually a Tumblr called Superman is a Jerk or something less family
exactly.
friendly.
And it's all from the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, Golden Age Superman, where he's being a complete jerk.
So Clark Kent himself actually went through this moral development as the decades went on. We wanted the Chinese Superman to have that same moral development. The second thing is, I'm hugely influenced by the story The Monkey King, which is Journey to the West. It's a Chinese classic.
Plays a large part in American-born Chinese, which, by the way, is fantastic. You guys should all read it.
And The Monkey King also starts off as this major jerk. What Journey to the West is about is the Monkey King's spiritual journey, going from selfishness to selflessness. So Kenan is going to make that same journey.
I also was interested, I read an interview where you talked about picking his name, which posed some unique problems, because you guys probably know that people in the Superman universe tend to have alliterative names, like Lex Luthor, Lana Lang, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, Chinese names are super hard. It's ridiculously hard. I have an acquaintance who's a Mandarin high school teacher, and she was like, it takes me 3 weeks to come up with my students' names. It's so hard. Because there aren't defaults that you can go to, right? And the original, so this was a controversy. The original name, this is what I wanted. I wanted something to start with the K sound to kind of mirror Clark Kent. 2 is I wanted it to be immediately pronounceable by an American reader. And just having that combination was incredibly, incredibly difficult. I don't even think we got it right, because Kenan is, most people would pronounce it Keenan in America, but at least it's pronounceable enough.
What do the syllables actually mean? I know they actually have some kind of...
they have meaning. So Kong, there are actually only 2 common Chinese surnames that start with the K sound. It's Kang and Kong. Kang is a bad guy in the Marvel Universe, so we went with Kong. And then the second one, the Kenan part, it's 2 words. The first one means to overcome, which we felt like was appropriate for a Superman character. And the second, Nan, means south. And he's from Shanghai, people in Beijing call people from Shanghai Southerners.
I'm a world building junkie, so that kind of detail is so exciting to me. This is not the first superhero comic you've done. There was the Shadow Hero, which is sort of an origin story, right, for a forgotten Silver Age superhero.
Yeah, Golden Age, actually.
Golden Age, oops.
Yeah, Golden Age. So this fascinated me. This is something I learned from the internet, as you do with these sorts of things. But in the 1940s, there was a character by the name of the Green Turtle, and he is not awesome. He has a terrible suit. Like, he has a cowl and a cape and no shirt. That's what he looks like, okay? And he's kind of a Batman knockoff as well. He operates out of a turtle cave. He drives a turtle plane. But there is one fascinating thing about him, and that is that the rumor is he might be the first Chinese-American superhero. His creator was a guy named Chu Hing, who was one of the first Asian Americans to be working in the American comic book industry. And the rumor about Green Turtle is that Chu wanted his character to be Chinese-American like he himself was, but his publishers wouldn't let him do it because they didn't think that a Chinese-American superhero would sell in the American marketplace. So Chu Hing, being a cartoonist, gets super passive-aggressive. And that's what we do. That's what cartoonists do. And he draws these early Green Turtle comics so that you almost never see his face. He hides his face in shadow. He puts like furniture in front of his face. He puts other characters in front of his face. Most of the time you only see his back, right? And the rumor is that he did that so that he and his reader could imagine his hero as a Chinese American. Chu Hing never gets around to telling us his origin story, and I thought, man, this is like a hole in American comics history that I want to fill. So I teamed up with a guy named Sunny Lu, amazingly talented cartoonist, and together we created an origin story for this obscure character from the 1940s, and we firmly established him as a Chinese American.
That's almost like fanfic.
It totally is fanfic, and we were able to do it. We were able to do it because he's in public domain now.
It's not fanfic if you have a platform like that, but I sort of secretly.
It is fanfic.
That's my headcanon. Okay, cool. So the nice lady there is telling me you have 10 minutes left. So I'm just going to ask you, before we throw to the audience for questions, what's next? I know there's another volume of Secret Coders in the works.
Yeah, so right now I'm working on four projects. Secret Coders, I'm working on the continuation of Avatar: The Last Airbender in graphic novel format. I'm working on New Superman. And the next big project where I'm doing both the writing and the drawing is called Dragon Hoops. It is my first nonfiction work. I followed a high school basketball team out of Oakland for a season, for the 2014-2015 season, and it'll be about that.
Oh, that sounds so cool. And what are your plans for the rest of your term as the ambassador for young people's literature?
Well, we are ramping up to do something for the summer. We really want to put together a really full summer program. We're trying to figure out how to get the word out about that.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. I think it might be time. Do people in the audience have questions? Do we have people with microphones? Do we have? Here we go. Hi, there's somebody.
Hi.
God, the lights are so bright.
Hi.
This is a very strange question. I was analyzing Boxers and Saints for one of my college classes on the graphic novel, actually, and I
That's
came up
kind
with,
of awesome.
Okay,
Thank you.
it kind of was, and I was kind of really happy when I saw it in the syllabus because I'm rambling. But so I came up with a theory about why Saints was very dully colored except for the visions.
Okay,
And
awesome.
I'm curious if I came up with the right reason. So why did you do that?
I thought you were going to tell me your reason first.
My theory was because Joan of Arc's visions were supposedly in gold.
Wow. Okay, that's kind of it. That's awesome. First of all, thank you for doing homework about one of my comics. I really appreciate that. Boxers and Saints is a 2-volume graphic novel about the Boxer Rebellion. The good guys on one side are the bad guys on the other. The first volume, Boxers, I wanted to be about heroism. So I looked at heroic storytelling traditions like American superhero comics and like Chinese opera. So it's brightly colored, it's really long, it's really sad, kind of the way Chinese opera is. And then the second volume, I wanted it to be about sainthood, saintliness. And regardless of what faith tradition you come from, whether it's Eastern or Western, saintliness is always tied in with humility. So I wanted that book to seem much more humble than the first one. That's why it's shorter, that's why it's dully colored. I actually was fighting for my publisher to print it on like cheaper paper, but they would not let me do that, which is probably a good idea, But that was the thinking. But what you were noticing was actually the Joan of Arc sequences we wanted to model after illuminated manuscripts from like old school Europe. And that's what you were seeing, right? So it looks much more like illuminated manuscript if it's set against a dull tone.
I think we have time for 2 more questions, so step up.
How does American-born Chinese relate to like your experiences, and if it does, like?
Well, first, thank you for, I'm assuming you read American-Born Chinese,
Yeah.
Is that true? Thank you for reading it. American-Born Chinese is a work of fiction, but I definitely pulled really heavily from my own life to write that book. Especially the middle storyline about Jin Wang, that Chinese-American kid who's growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood. I pulled heavily from my late elementary school years and my junior high, especially junior high. Junior high was when I experienced the most explicit racism, because people in junior high, including me, are jerks, right? Anybody who's gone through junior high, you know that. But thank you for your question.
I'll be quick, it's not a question, it's a compliment. I'm a middle school language arts teacher, and over the years I've built a pretty extensive personal classroom library for my students, and Boxers and Saints is the most stolen text out of
That's a great
awesome.
accolade.
Thank you so much.
Can we take one more question? No, we're done? Oh, one more, okay.
Hello. First of all, I want to say I've read all of your books, and Boxers and Saints is probably my favorite graphic novel of all time.
Oh, wow, thank you. That's really gratifying to hear, because that took 6 years of my life, that book. But thank you so much.
I want to know what made you decide to take the Boxer Rebellion and create it into a graphic novel.
Well, I didn't really know that much about the Boxer Rebellion when I started that project. I grew up in a Chinese-American Catholic community, and in the year 2000, Pope John Paul II canonized a group of Chinese Catholic saints. So for my home church, this was like a big deal. They freaked out about it. They had all sorts of special masses and celebrations, or egg rolls everywhere. Anytime you see giant trays of egg rolls around Chinese people, they're really happy about something, right? And I was inspired by these festivities. I looked into the lives of these canonized saints, and I discovered that they were a lot of them were martyred during the Boxer Rebellion. And they were martyred specifically because back then, if you were Chinese and you embraced any sort of Western faith, you were seen as somebody who turned your back on your culture. So the more I read about the Boxer Rebellion, the more I felt like it mirrored this tension that I had felt between the two halves of myself as an Asian American, between these Eastern and Western halves. So I really went in, it was a little bit selfish. It was a little bit like looking in the mirror. I really went in wanting to understand this tension in myself.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you for the question.
All right, thank you. We can take 2 more? Okay, we can take 2 more. Yay.
Hello.
Hi.
I read American-Born Chinese in college, part of my identity class. Do you have any advice for Asian American people on how to write, sort of writing things that everybody would like, and also about Asian comments and culture?
Okay, so you're asking for advice for Asian American writers. Are you an Asian American writer?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, first, just for writers in general, I think one of the things you have to realize is your self-doubt and fear is just never going to go away. It'll always be there no matter what you do. So you just have to hug it like a friend, and just recognize that it'll always be there. As an Asian American, I would say in general, there's this really weird thing that happens where if you get deep into your own experience, if you get specific, it suddenly becomes universal. You know what I mean? It's like this really weird thing. The more specific you get, the more details you lend, the more authentic your experience becomes, and the more universal appeal it has. So get over the fear, and then go deep and specific. That would be my advice.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask whether the Sun Wukong part of American-Born Chinese actually follows the storyline of Journey to the West.
The Sun Wukong part of Journey to the West, of American-Born Chinese deviates. It deviates. I really hope that American-Born Chinese is not your only exposure to Journey to the West, because that book is mind-blowing and amazing. There's a reason why Chinese people have been reading that book for 500 years. when I first started doing comics as an adult, I wanted to do some kind of adaptation of the Monkey King story, simply because I have a deep childhood attachment to it. And originally I was just going to do a straight adaptation. But then I realized that almost every working cartoonist in China has done a straight adaptation, and they're all better than anything I could do. So I set aside that idea. And eventually, the way I came back to it was I realized I'm going to use the Monkey King story as a way of talking about the Chinese-American experience. Because none of those Chinese artists could do that, right? And that's why I deviated. I deviated in ways that I felt like would bring in, American aspects to the story.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for coming out, and thank you for those really thoughtful questions. You've been a wonderful and very patient audience.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you to
all.
Jean Yang.
Thank you for coming out.
And just so you know, you'll be signing, right?
Yes.
You'll be signing downstairs. I've been told line 4 on the lower level. So.
Yep, line 4 on the lower.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you all very much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.